Good morning, everyone. This is Mortgage Pros 411. I'm Audrey Boyce-Snow with Kevin Casey, and today we are joined by none other than Ron Hetrick. I tried to figure out what title I should use for you, and it said principal
Yes.
economist. And I wanted to know whether there's a difference between a principal economist and a principled economist.
A principled economist? Is
Yes.
that what you said?
Do you have principles? Are you're
I
functioning
think
as
there
an
yeah, I
economist?
think there's a difference. But yeah. Yeah.
All right.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a great way to come out of the gates firing there.
Yeah,
Well,
there you go.
yeah, at least I thought it was interesting. I don't know about the rest of the world. A couple things. First of all, the Fed started their meeting today. It is Jerome Powell's last meeting as Fed chair. Holy guacamole, it's finally here. The probe against him was dropped
Yes, of
by the
course.
DOJ, so that is something. Perhaps we'll have a
Shocker.
new Fed chair at some point. We'll see. I don't know. Anything's possible these days, it feels like. In other news, tomorrow's we have starts and permits, durable goods. The 10-year is not going the right way. We are not in the green on mortgage rates, mortgage-backed
Mhm.
securities, therefore mortgage rates. So let's talk about something else, shall we? Ron, we're going to start with something that you know probably zero about. NMLS. That is the place that we register ourselves with at the National Registry for LOs. So it may be of note for anyone on the call who has a license. Kevin and I have both logged in and both of us have updated our MU4, which, as we know, opened up this month, and you must have it completed well before our usual November, date that we can
Deadlines.
start.
Yeah, I believe it's August 15th is the deadline.
Don't
Might be
ask.
wrong
I
on
don't
the
know. I,
exact
I want
day.
to say the 31st. So, for God's sake, don't go off our dates right now. But
Get it done
point
sooner
is,
versus later.
what?
Get it done sooner versus later. It
Yes. Okay.
takes
So
5 minutes.
both of us called, and thank God I called because I hit this point, click click click, answer the questions, and then I got to a point where it was asking me to click to have another credit report and another background check, and I'm like, God, I always feel like I just did that, but I'm often wrong. But I thought, let me just make sure I'm doing this correctly. And I called, and I'm very happy I did. Did not need a credit report or a background check, which saved me whatever that cost. But more importantly, there were some things I had to adjust on self-reported employment. I don't know why this is a thing now. And the woman on the phone walked me through the whole thing and helped me understand what I should click or unclick or whatever. I mean, granted, if it blows up and it was all wrong, then maybe it wasn't so great. But it did. They're always really helpful. So we would encourage you, get it done, check it off your list of things to do, and call them.
Yeah.
Kevin, anything to
I,
add to that?
I echo the same thing because I tried to do it online first, and then they've changed the website, so it's not the one I'm used to coming into. So I'm like, well, am I in the right website, or is this some hacker's website? Because I've been getting a lot of those hackers lately. They figured out that they changed the website, so no one knows what their website looks like anymore, so the hackers can take advantage of that.
Okay,
So
that is a
I
good reminder.
I did call, and the guy offered to stay on the call the whole way
Yes,
through. And at
mine
first,
too.
like, I don't need help. I'm a guy. I can do this on my own. And he goes, no, no, I'll just stay here. You may need me. There's a few questions towards the end. It turned out there was a question in the middle because I was clicking no, 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 no. And oh, wait, I got a yes because I am president of board of a charity and you have to disclose if you're uh, operate any other organizations. And that's an organization I definitely operate. So I had to go back. And that was weird because when I switched the no to a yes, that triggered things and added extra questions into the thing. So be careful not to switch your answers. Get the answer right the first time. Otherwise, it creates more work. Um,
Well, it's
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 a
more of the
subtle
point of
element.
Kevin. It's more the point of read the questions before you
Yeah,
answer them. It could be that
no,
too.
no, no.
Don't
I'm,
just go
I'm
no,
a
no,
loan
no like
officer.
Kevin.
I just click no all the time. That's
Exactly, exactly. Okay, moving
But
right
but
along.
to the end, the exact same thing. The guy stayed on to the end. I nearly made the same mistake of it looks like you're required to order a credit report and a background check, and you're not required to do that. So
And
stick
I
with
would also like to state that Kevin texted me 3 times asking for NMLS's phone number, which you can Google. Okay. So you can find their phone number online fairly easily, or just text me and I'll find it for you. It's one of those. Also, Kevin had a really good point reminding us that we are getting a lot of phishing emails from people posing as NMLS. So be careful of that. And on that note, we got a note from our company just saying that phishing attempts were up big time, and they're getting through the security systems of the companies, and that you have to watch out for. So, okay, Ron, now that your eyes have glazed over, you have way more information about NMLS than you
Fascinating.
ever
Yes.
hoped for, wanted, or thought would happen in your lifetime. We're going to move on to other things like we've got the war still going on, impacting oil prices. Gotta love that, which is, oh, I don't know, maybe influencing what's going on with the MBS. So, Ron, any thoughts on all of that, or should we move it along?
Got lots of thoughts. Yeah. You know, we just recently published a paper, not, I guess, been a couple months now, called Fault Lines. And in Fault Lines, it's funny when we were writing the paper, you're like, oh, this is great. And then it's like everything really came to roost. So the point of Fault Lines was to say that you have three things happening simultaneously, and it's almost impossible to figure out which one is causing what to, because I'm a labor economist, and we're ultimately concerned with, well, why are people not hiring? And why does everything seem very, very stuck? And so you could talk about anything. Well, entry level jobs, are people getting hired? And oh, these IT layoffs, like what's happening? And there's the fault line of geopolitical events, and that are things like, I don't know, a war that you may not have seen coming, tariffs that changed every other day, changes in immigration policy. Like all of these things, cause employers to go, hold on a second, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to hire just yet. And then the second fault line is this whole thing with around artificial intelligence and people trying to figure out what is it? Should I be using it? People keep telling me to use it, but I'm not really getting any ROI from it. And so I'm sitting here and I'm spending money and I don't want to hire maybe until I feel like that's, makes a lot more sense. And then there's this third fault line, which is the fact that because we were only really getting labor force growth through immigration and largely for the past several years through the asylum seeking program. And we undid that. We sent home about 675,000 people last year, gone to a couple 100,000 more basically self-deported. So that puts us at about 1.4 million down on our labor force because of a benchmark, which helps us to get a little closer to reality versus where we were, say like a year ago. So these three things together make it impossible to say, okay, we're not getting much payroll job growth. Okay, is it the war? I don't know. I mean, yes, that could affect gas prices, and that anybody dependent on gas as an input may say, well, I don't want to do anything right now because my costs could go up. Is it because of, they're spending money? If you're in the IT industry, maybe because of the AI so part of it, or our payroll's not going up because we had, 100, well, sorry, about 1.5 million asylum seekers that were on payrolls, and we're sending them home. So that's a minus 1.5 million that's been occurring as time's going on. Maybe we're hiring, maybe we're doing great, but there's that subtraction that's occurring. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's as an economist, it's torture because if you look at any economic model, the one thing we always say is all things being equal. All things being equal, this is what's causing it. Well, this is going to go like this, all things being equal. Nothing has been equal. Every week has been a new unequal. Like we can't keep things stable enough to discern what's actually going on. And I see economists and I see reporters jumping out ahead of the pack. AI is causing these layoffs. No, not really. The interest rates are mixed into that. Cost of capital is very expensive. Geopolitical events make some people uneasy. Blah 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 blah. Other people are saying, it's the policies are causing this, and we're like, well, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, that's a big non-answer from your economist, but I'm just being honest. And I think people who are saying this is what's causing X are probably should wait. And that's what I'm trying to do, is wait and see where this all ends up.
You're
So
stalling.
if your choice in this moment is to be honest, I guess we have now established that you are indeed a
I'm a
principled
principled
economist.
economist. Yeah, I feel like,
Wow.
I feel like that's been my whole point the past several years is to try to work through. There's a lot of paid for hype for things like AI, and so you have to kind of counter that with facts. And then there's a lot of political narrative that wants you to believe that this is causing all of these consequences. And I go,
Yeah.
look, I've been doing this for 34 years. Like, it's not that simple. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's the most easiest thing. And the most easiest answer right now is there's really no increasing demand in this country. Like, our population's not growing. The native born population is going to start inverting in 2030. That's not a guess. I mean, that's what we know. So we look at these kind of things and go, our economy was starting to slow down before the pandemic, back in the 20 teens. And I think it's still showing patterns of it's just maybe we're reaching the end of who we've been for decades, this growing and growing economy. Maybe that's starting to stall. And maybe we did some hyper hiring in 21 and 22, which we can prove it. We can look at the data, and that's facts, whether you like them or not. But what you're left with, and this is so important, and credit goes to Brookings Institute, but they looked at where our population and labor force were heading, the aging population, and they said the break-even number for payroll job growth is probably somewhere around -2 to 25, maybe 50,000 a month. I mean, break even, which means that would be perfectly acceptable. If the economy added zero jobs, because we don't really have a labor force that's growing, well, then that would be fine. That's what break even means. Like, that means your things are staying fine. Weird, because you're not used to
Okay.
that.
Okay, so we're going to go backwards in time a little bit because the reason that I well, I struggled to find the word to describe how I felt when I found you after all those years of looking for someone who could shed some light on how in the world the Bureau of Labor Statistics comes up with that jobs report every month. And then bingo, there you were, popped into our life. You came on the show, you enlightened all of us. It was amazing.
Thank
So,
you.
so let's go back to that for a minute, just because then we can go forward to the recent jobs reports. So you ran the division at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, also known as BLS. Kevin, did you see how I went backwards on that? Usually Kevin is the one going, could you please define what that acronym just meant? And this time I defined it and then said the
Led with it.
acronym. How did you
Great.
like it? Good? Okay. So anyway, the you explained to us how those numbers, how that works. So why don't
Yes.
you walk us through that again? Because there has been less in recent months, but there has
Yep.
been a lot of hoopla around those numbers and how they're created and whether they're political or
Right.
not, et cetera, et cetera. So enlighten us again.
Yeah. So basically, these are payroll employment numbers. So a company is basically contacted through very well, contact is getting old because now this is all pretty much automated. But if they were being contacted or if they're in the automated system, what happens is BLS asks them a question: how many people were you on your payroll last month? How many people did you have on your payroll? And what was the aggregate pay of those people? How many production workers did you have? How many women workers did you have? What was the total amount of hours that were booked and everything? So in doing that, a company literally goes, we paid 200 people last, the week of the 12th of last month, we paid 200 people and they worked X number of hours and blah, blah, blah. That is the number. That's what's being asked for by companies. So where things got really, really messy in the past several years is that you would say to me, how many people did you pay? And I'd look out and I'd go, I got 200 people. Well, in that 200 people, I had a bunch of people who were maybe waiting for their asylee status to be approved. So they applied for a work permit. They waited 150 days. The queue to get a work permit, which normally should take a couple months, was now taking 9 months, a year. And so I'm like, well, they have individual tax numbers, ITINs. So I paid them. And of the 200 people I had, 50 of those people were asylees pending status. And therefore, I paid them. Problem: those people are not eligible for unemployment. Okay. These asylees are not eligible. So what happens is I paid these people and then I told you 200, then I went to the unemployment insurance place and I said, "Oh, how many people do I have eligible for unemployment insurance? I have 150." Well, I told you 200 BLS and I told unemployment insurance 150 because both of these questions were asked in a way that I have to tell you that. So what happens is every year the payroll survey ask employers, tell me their numbers, and then with much delay, then goes in and says, okay, let's see how good of a job they did telling us their numbers. And they look at the unemployment data and they go, oh, that's not how, they said this, but they have this. Well, if everybody's bringing in an unprecedented number, I mean, I can show you that data, but you're talking about a number that was flat forever. And then we have 2 years, 2.5 years, basically 22 to mid 24 of an unbelievable asylee program. Like I said, I think it was 2.5 million that kind of came in and were a part of things. About 1.5, 1.8 were actually working. Those people are not being counted by unemployment insurance. So every year we benchmark and the number shrinks. And everybody goes, you lied. You told us things were so much better than they were. And we're like, well, no. I mean, you asked me how many people I paid, and I paid that number of people. But the second one question was how many people do I have on unemployment insurance? That's a different question. And that was driving everybody crazy. Now, in the course of a month, that's not exactly what's going on, but we can take this and put it into the course of a month. So what was happening is BLS kept putting numbers out and then revising them down. Okay. So what's going on in that case? And now I need you to understand, I am speculating here based on what I know about employer behavior. I supervise the payroll survey. It's been a long time, but I still know how this thing works. Your first respondents are the most automated, comfortable people out there. So the people who are going to tell you their payrolls right away probably did not have much happen dynamically. This like the same, pretty much the same payroll they had last month, same one they have this month. It's going to be pretty unexciting. Maybe they hired, but these are the easy ones. By the second and third, there's 3 times, your 3 collection periods that are taking over the course of these couple months. The people who are the laggards start to report. Now, these are the people who have experienced the most dynamic change, number one, or are trying to figure out, well, I have these people on my payroll, but I brought in all these asylee seekers. I'm trying to figure out if I should include them. You know what? Maybe I won't. You know what? These people weren't eligible. And they come in negative. They're coming in lower. So the people who are experiencing this dynamic change in a lower capacity kept coming in every single month lower. So every month we'd get a big number and we would revise it back down again. And a lot of it was just in the fact that these numbers were changing dramatically for the employers themselves. What's been really funny is after this whole thing stopped, after we went through the deportations last year, right? We stopped the asylee program, okay? Over the course of 25, we're easing off the asylee program. We start deportations and everything. Lo and behold, as the year goes on, the numbers get more stable and more stable and more stable. And you're not hearing people in 26 sitting here talking about, this whole thing is like everything's revising so badly. Well, no wonder, because there's no weird things going on in the system. We're back to a very predictable labor market. So employers are able to look at their payrolls and go, they're stable, they're firing them in. Everybody's kind of experiencing the same change. I would dare you with everything I've got that if we were to reignite the asylee program, you would watch all of this stuff go right back to where it was at. So I don't think it's any surprise why we were seeing the craziness that we saw. I don't think there's any surprise whatsoever that we're not seeing it now, because guess what? Before 23, 24, because asylees came in and it took a long time to get it processed, but before that time, weren't really getting revisions there either. So this is like you were getting a large revision at the end of the year. If you remember the last 2 years of Biden's term, the big complaint was the Republican Party saying, well, these numbers were all overinflated. Look, they've been revised way down. Well, yeah, those last 2 years included the 2 biggest asylee years in the history of our country. So yes, of course they're going to revise down because they weren't paying paid unemployment insurance. That's all over. So yeah, I know that might be really complicated, I think, for people to try to understand, but the important thing about it is no one was lying. And everybody was reporting the data that they were being asked to report the best they knew how to report it. It's just you introduced the most incredible dynamic into something that's usually pretty boring, and that incredible dynamic just sent the numbers all over the board. We had a severe negative revision in our population this past year. There will be one more year of that because the benchmark revision, the population estimate was mid 24 to mid 25. They go mid years. So as all of these deportations were happening, a lot of them were coming towards the end of 25. So when we go mid 25 to mid 26, expect another population down revision. So expect these population numbers to keep coming down. Expect all of the stuff to keep heading down. And then we'll get back to what should be a baseline again. That assumes we don't change immigration policy dramatically during this time. So stay tuned. But if you're sitting here looking out in the future going, I wonder what's going to happen next, expect population numbers to come down. Expect the payroll survey adjustments that these big payroll adjustment surveys that were coming down, expect those to temper off. That should start to ease. Probably still down, but not to the degree of which we just saw last year, which was 900,000. I don't know, something like
Yeah,
that.
it was close to 1 million for the last
Yeah.
2 years.
And now
So
it's
you
all
think this
it makes perfect sense.
less discrepancy between BLS and QCEW going forward?
There should be, because you no longer have that group. I mean, we revoked asylee status for almost every single country out there. The ones we didn't were much, much smaller. I think Haiti is still in the air. They're going back and forth about that one. But that's not to the numbers. I mean, Venezuela alone was 675,000, and we revoked that and sent those people back. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Big numbers that we never talk about. We should
Yeah.
talk about those things.
Okay. I am not, I can't even articulate the thoughts in my head about Venezuela and revoking anyway, that's a whole nother thing. So with all
That's why
being
I think that's why we prioritize stabilizing that country, because we knew we were sending these people back, but we couldn't send them back to the country that we had given asylees to. So basically the answer to that was, well, let's fix the problem. Let's fix the glitch. So when we send these people back, we can say, no, your country's no longer unstable. You no longer have a leader you have to fear. We're running that country now. And so I think that these things were all kind of in play.
So in 2024, you and your company published The Rising Storm, and
Yep.
you predicted that there would be a deficit of 6 million workers by 2032. We're in 2026. How are we doing with that number? Where are we in all that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what's so crazy. So if you had a growing labor force, if you had the economy kind of expanding at a rate, it's a weird thing to say, well, what should we really have? So let's focus on that job openings number, right? So JOLTS comes out every month. Now, prior to the pandemic, JOLTS had gotten up to about 6-7 million. And at the time, we were like, this is ludicrous that it's this high. Well, right after the pandemic, and we had all those COVID payments going out, so all these people dropped out of the labor force to kind of take those payments instead of work. We ended up ballooning to 12 million. Okay, so that number was just absolutely obscene and really wasn't really realistic. Like, had we hired all those people, we'd be in a phenomenal recession right now. But we were almost capped by our inability to hire those people. What's been interesting is that job openings number has plummeted back down again to roughly around the level that it was prior to the pandemic, which we considered at that time to be kind of ludicrous. There's the ratio that they look at, which is the number of unemployed people to the number of job openings. And that number is now 1-to-1, again. So that's the number we kind of had in the past. That is considered a very tight labor market. The unemployment rate, as you may have noticed, is still historically very low, 4.3%. The number of people collecting unemployment right now is towards its all-time historical low numbers. The number of people go, well, they're not collecting unemployment because they're long-term unemployed. The number of long-term unemployed people is hovering at historically low numbers. So all of these things, because of our labor force changes that we're having, we are not seeing this kind of huge available labor force. So if the economy said, okay, let's say the war ends and tariffs are stable for a second, what could companies do? What would companies want to do? How much have they pent up hiring? How much are they trying to hire right now, but they can't find people? There is a shortage in certain occupations right now. Is there the level of systemic shortage that we first saw in Storm? Well, no, but Storm is a rising storm. We didn't predict a shortage, not in 26. We said that the first waves of this would come 27, 28, but intensify so that by 29 and 30, it would get really, really bad. And we're not backing off of that because the population dynamics have only adjusted in favor of what we said in the paper. So with these, when we wrote Rising Storm, the native-born population was projected to invert in 2039. That has now been I don't know, I don't want to say corrected, but through all of these different things that happened, now they're saying it's 2030, 9 years ahead of when they said it was going to happen. The until from when they made the original prediction, so 24 to 34, the over 65, people have to hear this, to 2034, the over 65 population in the US is going to grow by 9 million. The under 24 population is going to shrink by 7 million. Okay? We're not, this again, we're not guessing. These are population numbers. You know how many people were born.
Right.
So that over 65, well, you could say, well, what if all these people just suddenly died? Well, yeah, then you're over 65, 9 million wouldn't be correct. But otherwise, we expect that that's going to grow by about 9, and that under 24, that population serving the older population who needs things still is shrinking by 7 million. And I think that that's where you kind of take these numbers in totality and go, well, then we're in a world of trouble because we don't have an entering labor force to the degree that we used to. We still have them, just a much, much smaller one. And the prime age labor force, you have a lot of people who still have a lot of wealth, who are retiring before 65. We don't expect that to abate much. I mean, Gen X's did pretty well. I would even argue that the older millennials have done pretty well, where this starts breaking down, as I think, with the younger ones. So we're not projecting much of an increase. The average age of unemployment is 62, I believe. I think they declare they people say they will retire at 66, but it's actually 62. The government could raise Social Security to 1 million. It's not going to change much. I don't think people fully understand wealth accumulation. And people go, well, I'm not wealthy. And it's like, well, we're not talking, it's not everybody. I'm just trying to move the labor force percentage rate, the labor force percent participation rate down. And the projections office has that dropping by about another percentage point, which is millions more people. So that's not population. That's participation rate. That's the percentage of working people working age who are working. And they're saying, no, that's going to come down too. So even if it wasn't the fact that we had no entering labor force, we're still projecting that a lot of our labor force is going to leave in the next, next 5 to 10 years. Well, less than
I,
that, 5 to 7 years.
I'm a big proponent of keep working. I heard a story recently about some person who, I mean, way too much time on their hands, obviously lonely, falling for one of these scams. I mean,
Yeah.
blowing up their entire life. I'm like, go to work. Just go, just why are you at home? Like you're lonely, you're sad, oh, for God's sake.
The
Anyway,
biggest cure for
Well, the other
depression
thing
is
too,
serving
though,
another
is
person.
a lot of the employers are also retiring. So you have a lot of like sole proprietors that run small
Yeah,
shops, and those people are retiring.
it's
And
true.
if they close instead of, if they're not able to like spin off their business to someone else, and because a lot of them just close up shop,
Yeah,
there's jobs that just disappear.
true.
Um,
well, I mean, in theory, unless they're like one man shops and then, like a
yeah, there's a
hairdresser's
there's a
clientele just
lot
goes
of them.
somewhere else to have their hair done, right?
Yeah.
But what you just said, Kevin, what you're saying is a huge point. And I think it's something that only recently I started thinking about a lot more. And when we wrote Fault Lines, my writing in that was actually a much smaller bit versus what I've written in the lead as the lead author of the other papers. But my contribution to Fault Lines was saying, I don't think we're fully grasping what we're really saying about demographic changes. Because if your population is aging, what gets consumed changes. Japan, we used to equate Japan with innovation and the latest tech projects in the 80s and into the 90s. Well, starting in 2009, or 2000, their population started inverting. Now they're a much older society, and you just don't hear of those kind of things. In fact, when you hear about AI, one country you never seem to ever hear about it in is Japan, which would be the country you'd think would want it the most of all of things. And I think it just speaks to the fact that everything does change. So do we actually could we by 2030 say we're short 6 million workers? I don't know. I think it's quite more reasonable now that we know the population inversion's occurring 9 years before we projected that we won't need that many people because we won't have that many people to serve anymore that we did prior. So I think that aspect is probably a more important aspect is what will right sizing look like? And I think where I've changed since writing Storm and in writing Fault Lines is that the developed world all developed nations are plateauing. And the only way they're not plateauing is if through immigration, whether that be Europe, uh, certain Southeast Asian countries or anything. Otherwise they would be going into the negative. So China's shrinking, obviously Russia's shrinking, Japan's shrinking, South Korea's about, they're starting to go through these things. Of course, the US is now projected to do that. Italy, Japan, these are big economies that were really driving the world economy,
Right.
but they aren't growing. And I mean literally population. So populations are filled with consumers. And if you don't have the consumers, they're not consuming. I've heard people say, "Well, AI is going to really grow GDP because of productivity," and I'm like, "That's cute." So I'm producing more for what? For who? Who's buying it? In the past, productivity allowed you. So when I built the first auto plant, I could now mass produce all these cars that everybody wanted.
Right.
That finally I didn't have to hand build them. The order log wasn't taking me 3 years to hand build. I could stamp a car out because the demand was there. We don't have that anymore. And people who say this stuff, it's very irresponsible. We're not in a situation necessarily in this world where we're supply starved. We're really not like this.
Yeah.
And not only that, but things like AI aren't really helping, even if they took a plant and made it fully automatable, well, they're only going to stamp as much as people want.
Right.
China used to be a big consumer of steel when they were expanding, but China's not in that situation now. So why would you need more steel? We have to think about those things.
So
So,
I had mentioned recently to someone, maybe Kevin, that, we're at 70% of our GDP is consumer spending, but with the demographics changing and the group of people who are buying things shrinking, then why do all this growth, right? All this huge growth that is driving our economy or has driven our economy. Is there a way to adjust how we do things so that we aren't so dependent on consumer spending to be healthy as an economy? And how do we look at things differently? And ultimately, Ron, we're always looking at how does this impact housing supply, demand for
Yeah,
housing, etc. That's what it's circling back for. That's why we're
that's a great
interested
question.
in what?
That's a great question.
This is why we're interested in everything that you have to say and hanging on to every word, because ultimately, what are we looking at
Yeah.
down the pike as far as housing?
It's a great question. And I will tell you that my takes on housing have not been very popular. But my takes are several years ago, I spoke to the Plumbing Association for the US, and it was the first time that I really dove in and thought about housing supply, housing stock. And what I did at that time is I saw the percentage of homes that were owned by people, I think it was older than 55, and that number had changed magnificently. I mean, it's massively up higher. But young people did not own a lot of housing stock. And then if you look at who moves homes, it's younger people. Younger people move more frequently. They put homes on the market. Older people tend to sit on more as investments. And if anything, what happens at the end of their life? Do they pass that home on and it stays locked down? Or do these people who didn't have children, are those properties liquidated at death? And you start to look at that and you go, the one thing everybody keeps saying is we have this massive housing shortage, and I keep saying I disagree with that. I don't agree with that take. If we were to liquidate most of the short-term rental market, I think you would have a housing stock like you've never seen in history. I've done the math. I mean, there was one point there was 670,000 homes on Airbnb, and we said, okay, if you put 500,000 of those homes on the housing market, you'd have the highest housing supply ever. But older people have taken a lot of those properties, or even younger people who, just trying not to work in traditional ways, are taking those properties and looking at them as investments. So that's locked down a lot of really good housing, and especially starter homes, which is what we're really looking for, because that's a great rental home, right? A two-bedroom, rent a place for short-term rental when you go on vacation versus, staying in a hotel. And I keep saying, like, you got to be careful not to overbuild because we aren't we're probably the next generation's not going to be as rich, right? Because young people didn't grow up. Young people currently aren't growing up as the world's buying population is exploding like boomers did. So boomers were being raised at a time that the global economy was exploding thanks to all of these consumers that all of these countries had. So their ability to make money, huge amounts of money, was much, much higher. So now when you have young populations, the countries that we would be selling to, like a Japan, which is, gosh, was it a lot, 6.3 million that they're down population? Like those economies aren't buying like they used to. The global economy can't expand like it once did. I mean, you only have Africa expanding population, and that's only 4% of global GDP. So who really cares? So if that's the case and the amount that people can make is kind of capped, then what you end up with is homes, high-priced homes, coming to market, being liquidated in the next 5 to 10 years at an incredible rate, with people, younger people who haven't made the earnings capacity to afford those homes. So one of two things has to happen. Those people just keep not listing the home, which is what you see in Florida half the time. They list and then they delist because they're not getting the price. Or there's a massive cut in housing prices, which means a lot of this equity that people have built up gets kind of annihilated. So if that happens, bad for the economy. Okay, so if these homes that were considered investments lose a lot of their investment value, it's going to really hurt the economy. But it's also going to hurt the economy if we're not selling homes, if we're not, moving these things forward. It will also hurt the economy that we just got old and we didn't really produce a lot of young people. And if the native born population inverts and most of your immigrants coming in are probably working lower paid jobs, then you have a huge mismatch here. Wealthy boomers who are leaving, a polite way of saying it, holding these expensive properties, but all of your incoming purchasers would be a very low income level. That's a problem. And I don't see the people who don't like my take can't argue that the whole dynamic is shifting away. When I tell you the over 65 population is growing by 9 million, one of the things everybody needs to understand is after 75, the likelihood that you're going to buy a house drops dramatically. At that point, maybe it's assisted living, more communal, like things like that, smaller homes, downsizing. That's what you're heading towards.
Ron, don't forget about my friend's clients. The mom and daughter were buying an investment property together. The daughter was in her 70s and the mom was 104, and they bought an investment property. They got a
Awesome.
30-year fixed mortgage. Talk about some optimism right there, huh?
Wow. That if she's
Wow.
around to see that paid off, she'll be the oldest person
That
in
would
human
be a
history.
miracle. Okay, so interesting. In one of your posts not too long ago, unfortunately, I didn't put a date on here. You said, fun fact, did you know that the unemployment rate for 20 to 24-year-olds, 2023 excluded, is the lowest since the Vietnam War?
Yeah.
Okay, so in light of everything that has just been said, how are they so employed?
Oh, why wouldn't they be employed? We
Okay,
don't
so
have many of them. So this
oh,
is
okay.
this is inherent in the problem.
Okay.
It fully explains itself. One of the things we keep saying is we just don't have that many young people. And right now this whole cry that everybody's doing is, well, entry level people are having problems finding jobs. And I've addressed this issue to death. If anybody wants to read it, I wrote something called "The State of White Collar Employment in the U.S." It's an article. It's not just an easy read. I have graphs. I have all kinds of things. We are pumping out business, finance, and IT people from colleges at a rate that the economy never should have ever done. The economy cannot consume those people. It doesn't need those people. It never did need them, and it certainly won't need them going forward. We just aren't. The IT industry is not in a place that it used to be, and that has nothing to do with AI. It's just the fact that as a country, our need for IT and progressions in IT have really are starting to change. We don't need that industry as much as we did. The finance and business industry, that's dependent on companies, enterprises growing at a rate that they've always grown, but they're not going to grow at that rate. I mean, the economy is not expanding on a population wise to be able to grow at that rate. So you'd have to greatly increase your exports, but that becomes a game of all developed nations are trying to export their way out of a demographic problem. So you're just going to be exporting into a mess that everybody else has. And once again, not so much now, but that's really going to take place over the next several years. So you do get into a situation where if companies start to look at it and go, look, our payrolls are good for what we have. In fact, given the way the economy is probably going to grow, once it's not being juiced by all this capital expenditure and like data centers, we probably need to start easing back. We're going to probably start holding on what we need to hire. And that is a problem when you're graduating a lot of the same people. So It's just going to be an interesting aspect to watch as go back to fault lines as the fault lines start to settle. Because right now everybody's like, it stinks. I'm like, I appreciate that. I agree to an extent. But by the way, if the economy does try to take off, understand we don't have barely anybody looking for a job. I just want you to understand that historically speaking, these are very low numbers. So we're not really going to be capable of generating a lot of people to go on payrolls when we have a near record low number of people collecting unemployment, for example. So these are people actively out applying, still within their realm of collecting unemployment. Like that number of people is sitting at all-time historical lows. So we really can't do something with much with that. So I think that's part of it is you just simply don't have a lot of these people and a lot of them are employed and people go, well, they're underemployed. And I'm like, whatever. I mean, I think we could all argue that we're underemployed. I don't think there's a person out there who goes, you know what? I'm really overemployed. I should not be making this. I am a total loser and I should be, I don't know why I'm at this status. I should be here. I mean, to a sense, life is about taking what you get until you get what you can. And I think, you know, I graduated, I got my master's in 1991 and in the middle of the Cold War recession. All my colleagues were taking jobs for $16,000 as assistant managers at Sears. They were MBAs. It was that or do nothing and starve, you know, or they were working as waiters and waitresses at that time because they couldn't find jobs. It's like that's what it looks like when the economy's not really hiring. And I think that's kind of a bit of where we are right now is it's not a hiring economy. It's a stagnant economy. And that doesn't make you feel good, but it's not unprecedented. We've been down this path before, but it's not being helped by the fact that we keep producing a lot of the same people. And I think at some point you're going to have to, we got to be a little bit more honest with our young people about the likelihood that your degree is going to pay you what you think it's going to, or that it's you're even going to be able to find a job in those majors. But we are, you know, why we write these articles is because we know that people aren't there yet. Their headspace isn't there.
Well, Zonda published a survey in mid 2025, and in it they said 92% of contractors reported difficulty in finding qualified workers. So, and we know the construction, we've reported
Uh,
a lot of that workforce, et cetera. And you have um, opined pretty quite a bit on how we do need to have a shift away from, you know, telling everyone they should get a 4-year
yes.
degree and that college is the end all, et cetera. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and this is something I started back in demographic drought, but it really came to fruition when I co-wrote Who's Going to Do the Work. So if anybody hasn't read that, think about the title and you figured it out. That's the paper. So
What
we
was the name?
interviewed 1,500. What was that?
What was the name of the?
The paper is called Who is Going to Do the Work? And if you look it up, it's on our Lightcast website. And all these articles that we write, I mean, all these research papers are free. We really are doing this just try to get people to understand what's happening. We interviewed 1,500 high school students and said, what are you going to do when you get out of high school? And, you know, obviously the vast majority are like, well, I'm going to go to college. And we can see from the data that no matter what everybody says, that's still the truth. I mean, the majority are going, you know, whether that's 63% or 62 or 60, people are picking apart really small changes here. It's the majority. And even if they don't finish, because a lot of people, well, they don't finish. Yeah, well, they still go. And when they go, their intention is to, at some point, kind of parlay this into something else. So when you look at those numbers, you know, 60% of the job openings in the US right now don't need a college degree of any kind. And they're really the jobs that just keep everything moving along. So retail, restaurants, truck drivers, you kind of name it. I mean, whether it's customer service reps or, you know, even people working in healthcare don't have degrees. There's so many people, there's so many jobs out there that kind of keep your community functioning. Cops, firefighters, auto techs, you know, they don't need a 4-year degree. So that's never going to change. I mean, that's how world started. Like, from the
Yeah.
time humanity started, you needed somebody to feed you, you needed somebody to take care of you, and things like that. It was only in a modern industrialized society that we kind of invented all of these other industries that allow a lot of people to not work, you know, like economists. And I think that that is something that will never change, and it hasn't changed. But what's changed over time is we used to have those people. We used to produce those people, but those we don't anymore. Like there's a lot of parents who are like, look, I didn't go through this, so you didn't go to college. I mean, there's just a lot of societal emphasis on getting a degree. I mean, it's you almost hear it everywhere. Well, we want to do whatever we can to have everybody be able to get a college degree. And I'm like, that's a horrible idea. Please don't do that. That would be very, very bad. What we should be doing, instead of making it seem like a college degree is the only way to be respected or anything else, is to stop esteeming the degree and start respecting the fact that any job that's contributing to society is amazing. When I talk to parents who tell me about their children, I'm way more impressed with the person who says, my son decided to go to become a plumber than the one who goes, well, they're getting a business degree from insert college here. I'm like, well, we don't need those people. I need the plumbers. Okay. And I think that is a monumental change in society. I'm asking you to take something that you've been saying for 30 years solid and on a dime shift that narrative immediately because it's demeaning and it's not even accurate anymore. What we truly value are the people who help society move along. And that is not what I think, especially if you just spent $80,000 on a degree, that's the last thing you want to hear somebody say. But once again, that's a dated message. The society's changing, and we have to allow these things to happen. One of the most popular posts I put on LinkedIn, the one that's just exploded on me, is I compared the wage multiples differences between a bunch of developed nations in the US. And I looked at a software developer next to a fast food worker next to a plumber. And no country over rewards a degree like the US. Developers 4.5 times, they're paid 4.5 times as much as a fast food worker when we look at advertised salaries, and 2.5 times more than a plumber. But in a country like Japan, they're equal. There is no
Oh,
multiple.
wow.
In fact, in Japan, a computer programmer is considered a menial job.
Wow.
And so
Huh.
that is what was really kind of created this is people say, well, if these other jobs just paid a better wage, then these people would fill these jobs. And I'm like, you hate it when they pay them a better wage. We just tried to do that in 22, and that caused all of this inflation, and everybody freaked out. So we started the asylee program to fix the unskilled labor problem that we had in this country. But see, we have no tolerance for the bottom coming up. So your other option is then the top's got to come down. If we have too many developers, which we do, then that top's got to come down. These salaries got to come down. Well, no, I just paid all this money for this degree. Okay, well, you're going to have to if you want these things to meet, then you're either going to have to let the bottom come up or you're going to have to bring the top down.
In a lot of the Scandinavian countries that score much, much, and I mean much, much higher than we do on the happiness factor or
Yeah,
on the happiness scale, the often the doctor lives next door to the garbage man, and it
that's
is more
right.
equal. And again, for an economy that is based on, we're a capitalist economy, et cetera, and we really kind of push back from the idea that the garbage man who doesn't go to school for 20,000 years approximately is going to make as much or be able to afford the same things as the doctor. And to your point, like it is going to require a shift for all of us.
Yeah,
Bill made a comment, we need more of our students learning a trade. We as parents need to change our perspective so they will change their
yeah,
perspective, which is true. And a couple of years ago, I had a family member, I went to their graduation. They had gotten their undergrad from UC Santa Cruz and then got a master's degree from USC. At that point, they had that master's degree cost them almost 100 grand. That's before they didn't make payments and the interest starts to accrue, right? And the next move for this person was going to be, I'm going to go get a PhD. And I jumped up and down, kicking and screaming. And I said, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you thinking? Make sure, A, you like this profession. B, is there an ROI? Oh, you don't know what that
that's
is?
right.
Because of course you have the master's degree, but don't know what ROI is. Got it. Okay, that's
Wait,
fine.
what's an
Um,
ROI,
but
Audrey?
the ultimate thing was when they got a job, they could not get a job for more than $15 an hour in their profession. And I'm like, okay, we have lost our freaking minds, right? So
Yeah.
it is wild out there. Okay, so I did this rewind. Are you familiar with Freakonomics, Stephen Dubner?
Oh, of course. I
Okay,
crushed that
so
book when it came
not
out.
just the book. So they have Freakonomics Radio. So
Yeah, I know the
obviously,
podcast.
obviously I've read the book, but I listened to a couple episodes and then just and they kept referencing old episodes. So I, in all of my stupidness, decided I'm going to go back to 2010, start at the very beginning and listen to every single episode, which I am in the process of
Commitment.
doing. I'm up to 2017 right now. And it's very interesting as I'm listening because I love this podcast. I love it. It's so interesting. There's so many various subjects and ideas, etc. But I will tell you that uh, how should we put it? The experts, they're very elitist. I mean, very. I mean, the way that they discuss their research around
Yeah.
people who are educated or not educated, et cetera, is really something else. And it's really kind of struck me recently. And and so again, there has to be a shift and it needs to start everywhere. And the idea that we think of them as higher and someone else is lower and it's
Crazy.
all I mean, just because I
Crazy.
mean, so I
So
know
demeaning.
somebody who's an electrical contractor. I'm contractor, yeah. Electrician essentially for commercial projects. So smart. I mean, so smart. And okay, stack him up against a PhD. Which one is smarter? Who knows? You know, like
Okay.
a PhD, just go
Who
get a
cares?
degree and then never learn anything else. Who knows?
Yeah.
So again, it's going to be a interesting shift, and the economy may force this point because
So if every software developer in this country quit tomorrow, and every garbage person in this country quit tomorrow,
Garbage may be more in demand.
oh yeah,
there would be way more in demand. Now you'd say, well, certain tech services would stop working. And I'm like, well, not developers typically aren't keeping things alive and awake. They are fixing bugs. But it's an oversimplification of something that we go, look, we know these are critical. I mean, if
right.
your HVAC breaks in Florida and I mean, you want somebody out that day. So if they're like, I can't get out there for 3 days, then that's just absolute panic. But if an app on your phone isn't working, you'll figure out another way of getting
Okay,
through
Ron,
your
I'm
life.
going to stop you right there because
I
I
know you're depending
recently
on your phone.
I had to change phones and I had apps that weren't working. I thought I was going to die, actually fall on the ground
You
dead.
had a high score
Okay.
in Angry Birds. I get it. Like sometimes you just got to keep that thing going. Now, the thing is about it is in either of those situations, I don't want to undo what everything I've been fighting for. And that is, it's not that I think a garbage person is more important than a software developer. I'm saying they are needed for
Yeah.
society to function. But only in
Yep.
the US have we polluted the water so badly. In Europe, in like skilled trades, for example, it's an admirable profession. It's been passed down through generations. The work they do, they take great pride in. The earnings are certainly enough for them to support their family. There's no great campaign like do the trades in Germany or Italy, for example, because it's esteemed at a much higher level. In the US, we've created a huge, huge problem. I believe the reason why we have that problem to an extent is because things like a degree are very, very expensive. And, excuse me, universities, which are supported by the state, are very much incentivized to make you feel like you're a loser if you don't go because they need to fill their classes because these are pretty large investments. Like I said, they're made at a state level, they're made at a university level. There's a lot of people that will lose if you stop going to college. You personally, by just getting a skilled trades and working, are not going to lose. In fact, you're going to do really, really well. If you become an electrician assistant at 18, become a master electrician by age 25, you're going to do better than anybody
Yeah,
coming
you'd
out
be
with a
making
business
way more
degree.
money than kids going out of college.
And
Yeah, and you're in here with no debt. Yeah, no
AI
debt.
does not replace you.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
you're
funny.
not technology,
Yeah.
all that nonsense isn't going to touch it. We don't say any of those things to anybody. And because we don't want them there, because there's no money to be made in you just becoming a skilled trades person. Like you can get your skilled trade at a school that's probably not going to charge you a whole lot to do it. And then you're out. And, you're not in there for years and everything. And I think that this, once again, you're asking society to undo something that it's built 30, 40 years, locking into your brain. This is the
Yeah.
way you succeed. Oh, you didn't go to college, you're a failure. You went, okay, you're a success. Doesn't matter that you can't get a job, you're a total loser, still
Yep.
living with your parents at 35. No, 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 no. You're successful. The person who, worked retail straight out of high school, and by the way, is now a manager at that store, loser, you know, that is so incredibly messed up. And it's so ingrained in who we are. I still, after I get off the stage, I still have people like come up to me and talk about their kids and still almost apologizing to me about their kids they have who didn't go to college. And I'm like, you're talking to me. I'm the author of these things. Like that is totally wrong. Like,
Yeah.
that I'm pretty passionate about this in the opposite direction. So, When you sit there and say, well, my aimless child is going to join the military, I'm like, no, your aimless child is doing something really valuable. So
Yep.
you should feel so proud that they're joining the military. That's an amazing thing. That's awesome. I'm way more proud of that than, oh, they're going to become a lawyer or something like that, where I'm like, I don't know if that's necessary to keep society functioning, but we should be very careful about the way we esteem things.
It's
I
interesting you mentioned Germany because, again, in my little Freakonomics radio project, I was just listening to an episode and they were talking about Germany and their economy, but again, 2017. So I don't know where it is today because I know it's not doing as well. But
Very immigrant dependent.
they had an apprenticeship program that they had. Do they still have that? Do you know? So
They're big. That's a huge thing in that part of the world. Apprenticeships that's
still,
ingrained in the culture. Yeah.
yeah, but
okay, so
Germany is
it's
one of those
really
countries that
effective though because it what they said is it gives you an opportunity to you're educated, they but you're allowed to try different things while working in a trade, and it really helped them transition through the manufacturing, some of it shifting to China, but they still had manufacturing that was valuable, and we know that German everything is very revered, like
Mhm.
their engineering, the cars, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that was interesting. I thought maybe that's something we should really look at in the US is go back to having apprenticeship programs. It's how people used to learn things.
Yeah,
Kevin, you were
Kevin, what
going
were
to
you
say
going to say?
something
I was a couple things. Was one, so like I have, three kids, and the one that did not graduate from college is the one that's successful right now.
big time.
So that's quite interesting. The other one too, though, is I was just thinking back when I grew up, the neighborhood I grew up, there was quite the mix of professions of all the parents of all the kids I grew up with. There was a garage mechanic, there was a barber, there was fireman, there was a doctor, there was an attorney. They were all in the same neighborhood. Everyone was
Yeah,
kind of equal. And now today, it's almost all programmers and such.
that's
And
right.
so it's quite
That's
interesting.
because somebody jacked their rent up to 8,000 bucks a month, Kevin. No one else can
8,000,
afford
yeah,
to live
I know.
there.
Yeah, that's the only way they can
No,
afford it. But
so you can see, even by the statements that you're making, we've evolved to this point.
Right.
And undoing something that takes decades to evolve to takes decades to unevolve. So
Yeah.
that's why when I look at these things and writing Storm and writing Who's Going to Do the Work, there's a point where you start to paint a really dark picture for people. And I always tell people, I am not here to scare you to death, but you have to understand how deeply embedded this is in the psyche of this country. Like you're asking people to like esteem something that they've only been trained to look down on. And I think it's what's hilarious about it is how much we do appreciate these people, whether they be in
Right.
the military, whether they be skilled trades. Like we greatly appreciate them, except when it comes to the respect part. And then people are lying through their teeth and like, oh no, I respect them. Like, no, you don't. Like, stop. You're much more likely to say that about, somebody who's, an investment banker or a, software developer or something like that. And I'm like, and that's wrong. I've changed. Since I wrote these papers, I am not the same person at all. I
Mm.
practice what I preach, and I have the way that I even walk through airports and I look at people who are working in the food kiosk there, and I think, this is an amazing thing that you're working here. I can't tell you how thankful we are that you're here, or else, we'd starve to death. I don't know what gets people into those particular places in life, but instead of you thinking that, oh my gosh, life's really failed them, look at them in these jobs. No, you're the rat on the race. Like they're the ones, like they're doing something valuable. They can go to bed every night and know they did something really important. It's questionable whether you'll be able to say the same thing. And we need to start to think about things. Once again, I'm not here to tear somebody else down. It's just that the whole problem is this way this esteem thing works. As for apprenticeships, it is a thing. It's a big thing in the US. We have them. It's getting bigger. The current administration is investing in a lot more apprenticeship programs. We do recognize it, and thanks to the Mike Rose of the world, we understand that certain scholarships and things have to be raised up to help fund some of these programs, and it's happening, and that's great. But they'll celebrate classes of thousands, but we're talking about millions, and it's like you need a fundamental societal change. The unemployment rate for install, maintenance, and repair, so skilled trades is largely in there. It's also in construction. Those are sitting at near all-time historical lows. There are more people looking for a job in IT than there are looking for a job in skilled trades in this country. Okay, that is there. We just flooded the market with people with IT workers. Now, if I'm so oversupplied with IT workers and they can't find work, but I'm really struggling to find a skilled tradesperson, the value of those two to society is in the one that I is scarce. That's a scarce resource, and that's what's really valuable. So the next time somebody fixes your air conditioning and gives you a bill for $500 for an hour, you just say, cool. And you write the check and you walk away knowing that these people are scarce. What you don't do is say, this is highway robbery. And I can't, but it used to cost me, $50, 20 years ago when society was much more balanced. Back in 1992, I think is in the slide I have. I think it's 92. The US labor force was split 50-50, 50% degreed, 50% not degreed. Now it's 69% degreed, 31% not degreed. But the
Wow.
demands haven't changed. We're still a 50-50 need, but the balance of what we've produced is completely out of whack with where we are right now.
Okay, so Ron, I would like you to know we do our own measurement here at Mortgage Pros 411, and we decide whether something was good based on how fast it went. And considering that hour just went incredibly fast, this was great. So thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you. We're so happy that you have landed in our universe and that you're willing to come and share with us. And so with that, have a great week, everyone. Go find someone to help. That's what we're here for. We do have something valuable to contribute. Ron, why don't you tell them where they can find where can they find your writings, your
Yeah.
research?
So Lightcast, it's like light and cast, like casting a fishing boat. Lightcast.io is my company. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ron L. Hetrick. I post provocative content, but I'm just saying, I just do what I say because I'm trying to usually undo fear, a lot of fear in society that I'm trying to counteract with things like AI. And then the writings, demographic drought, rising storm, who's going to do the work, and now fault lines, all on the lightcast.io website, and encourage you to read them.
Yeah, and follow him on LinkedIn. He's really interesting. His posts are that's partly where I caught him to begin with. And again, we can also measure how well our went by the comments, which are really everyone's very grateful for all your information. So thank you. All
Very
right,
nice.
kids, have a great week. Go get some people to help and close some loans. Bye.